Hey everyone, Pastor Aaron here. Thanks so much for tuning in here at Central. We are in the last week of our worship series that we are calling Here to There. We've been talking about how God is always moving us, that faith is more about a movement rather than arriving somewhere or a destination. So over the last couple of weeks, here's what we have been talking about. We've been talking about how God has been moving us from a place of getting by to dreaming big. A place of hurting to hope. A place of numbing out to leaning in. And this week we're talking about how God wants to move us from a place of lashing out to loving more. And if you missed any of the past 3 weeks, I encourage you to head on over to our YouTube channel or to our webpage at central-lutheran.org and get caught up, because today we will wrap this series up by talking about God and how God is always moving us from a place of lashing out to a place of loving more. And I don't know about you, but as I think about the last two and a half years of our life, we have gotten really good as people at lashing out. Wouldn't you agree? And I want to start out by sharing with you one of my kids' favorite animated movie. It's a Pixar film, and it's called Inside Out. It's about an 11-year-old girl who is your classic Midwest girl who plays hockey, and her family announces to her that they are moving her from the only home that she's known. They are moving her from the Midwest out to San Francisco. And the movie really is about the emotions then that are going on inside of this pre-teenage girl as she gets uprooted from her Midwest home and gets carted off to San Fran. It's all about the emotions inside of her. And you see those emotions played out in characters in the movie, like the character of sadness and disgust and fear are all emotions that are animated. And my favorite character in the film is the character right here. This character is angry. And what I love about anger is that the character, whenever anger is in the room, anger pushes all the other emotions aside, grabs control of the wheel of the 11-year-old's life. And there's a scene where she is an infant sitting in a high chair, and her dad says, "I need you to eat your broccoli or else you won't get any dessert." Well, inside of the girl, anger takes control, pushes all the other emotions aside, and then has the girl chucking broccoli across the room from her high chair. I love this character in the movie because when anger is in the room, anger pushes all the other emotions aside and grabs control of the wheel. And here's what I think. In our world today, haven't we gotten more and more angry? Isn't it true in all of us? More often than in the past, anger has pushed all of our emotions aside, grabbed control of our wheels of our lives, and I want to argue that anger has driven us all to crazy town, right? Because here's what I know. Over the last couple of years, our anger has evolved. Remember the things that used to annoy you? Like people who would cut you off in traffic, people who didn't respond to my text, but you knew they were typing because you saw those bubbles, and yet they ended up ghosting me. Or at a movie theater, the level 1 offense when someone talks in the movie. Level 2 offense when someone talks to the movie. Or level 3 offense when somebody receives a phone call. And finally, the 4th offense, somebody receives a phone call and proceeds to pick up the phone call and talk. Those things used to just annoy me, but think about today. Everything seems to have escalated. Our anger has escalated. It's evolved. Our anger has caused us to end relationships with people we cared about. It's hurt our relationships with family members and people who used to be close friends. And we have allowed ourselves to get angry at the silliest things. We go crazy and we get angry with people who mask or don't mask, vax or no vaccine. Whether someone voted for your candidate or didn't vote for your candidate. We are getting angry at whether someone kneels during the national anthem or who doesn't kneel. We get angry whether someone feels this way about a school board issue or that school board issue. We get angry about whatever my issue is, whatever your issue is, and you get angry. And then you take it to the next level, and you get angry at people who aren't as angry as you are. And then we take to social media. We take to letters to the editor. We send those nasty emails. Our anger has evolved. Here at Central, we have a ministry called Groups. It's a ministry that is what it sounds like. It's small groups of people who gather together, where we build up one another and share life together. You know what? Over the past 3 years, with politics and school boards and city councils, it's almost like some people have anger groups. On social media, for example, you have that group that you belong to, and you vent with those 75 friends on Facebook who all agree and all are angry together. Your soccer moms and hockey dads, angry, angry, angry. And we actually enjoy it because it's actually kind of fun for us because we feel morally superior when we're surrounded by everybody who's angry at the same thing. We're right and everyone else is wrong. Everyone else is either evil or they're an idiot or they're an evil idiot. We're all more easily angered today than ever before. There is this great proverb in the book of Proverbs, and it says this: "For as churning cream produces butter, and as twisting the nose produces blood, so stirring up anger produces strife." You know this all too well. Over the last several years, we have had more than our share of strife that is produced by this evolution of anger. Another translation of this passage comes from the Message translation. It's the same verse, and it goes just like this: "If you're dumb enough to call attention to yourself by offending people and making rude gestures, don't be surprised if someone bloodies your nose. Churned milk turns into butter. Riled emotions turn into fist fights, or word fights, or internal fights, or family fights, or social media fights." The past several years, we've gotten into fisticuffs and street fights. We have become angrier than ever before. And here is what is unique about this anger that we are expressing. We all believe that our anger is justified. Think about it. We feel totally justified to act out when that lady steals your parking spot in Target. We feel totally justified being appalled at that volunteer hockey coach who maybe played your kid not enough time last Tuesday night. We feel totally justified at being appalled at the server who's worked the job of 3 different people because the restaurant can't find enough help, that server didn't bring your food in a timely manner. We feel justified. And you might say to me, "Well, Pastor, Jesus got angry too, you know. Remember the story, Jesus flipping over the tables of the money changers over the temple? If Jesus can get angry, then why can't I get angry?" Well, here is something you know and I know. We are not Jesus. And here's the thing about Jesus. Jesus knew when to flip tables and when to love his enemies. Here's something I've noticed in our world. And I find this interesting. Isn't it interesting that Christian people are oftentimes the most offended people in the world? Have you ever noticed this? Christian people get so offended because we tie our faith to every single issue. There is a whole group of Christian people who are offended if you didn't vote for Trump, and another group that are offended if you voted for Biden. There's a whole group of people, of Christian people, who will be offended if you feel a certain way about abortion, and another group that will be offended if you feel another way about abortion. There are groups of Christians who are offended based on how you feel about the life of gay and lesbian people or gender identity. Christian people get offended by all kinds of things, and I find this very curious. There's a great book out there that I want to highlight and recommend to you. And it's a book that's called Unoffended by Brant Hansen. And he was raised in a Christian home to believe that the Christian people inherently will be offended. That being a Christian and being offended goes hand in hand. And he talks about this. He makes the argument in the book that being offended is a choice, and that maybe Christians need a little different perspective. He writes this: "I used to think it wasn't incumbent upon a Christian to take offense. I now think that we should be the most refreshingly unoffendable people on a planet that seems to spin on the axis of offense." I love this. We should be people in our community that are known as those people who love their enemies' people. We should be people known as people who love their neighbor people. The book of James is a book that is way over concerned with how we live our lives. And there's a passage in James that I love, and it goes like this. It says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." He invites us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. If I were to ask you a question, I wonder what you would say. And the question is this: how many times was Jesus asked a question in the New Testament? Any ideas? Any guesses? Well, Jesus was asked a question 183 times. 183 questions was asked of Jesus. Do you know how many of those 183 questions he answered directly? Just 3. On the flip side, do you know how many times Jesus asked questions? In the New Testament, Jesus asked the people around him 307 questions. Why? Why? Because Jesus was always slow to speak and quick to listen. You see, being offended is a choice. You don't have to be offended by someone's political opinions because they're not going to kill you. Someone's personal preference isn't going to cause you physical harm. You are not going to die because of someone else's point of view. See, the definition of anger is this: anger is an expression that occurs when a goal, value, or expectation that I have chosen has been blocked, or when my sense of personal worth is threatened. There's a story about this teacher of the law, and he was really smart, and he knew the law inside and out. And he probably could have recited the Jewish law in his sleep. And I don't know if he was trying to trap Jesus or trick Jesus, but he went to Jesus and he asked, "Jesus, of all the religious rules that are out there, of all the rules that I have been teaching my students, that you have been teaching, all the rules from the prophets that have been handed down," he says, "Jesus, what's the most important one?" And the story goes like this: "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important: love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these 2 commandments." And what Jesus is saying to you, and what Jesus is saying to me, you always lead with love. I'm going to always lead with love, Jesus says. And here's what I love about Jesus. Jesus didn't call us to be right. Jesus called us to be loving. He invites us to lead our lives with love. And I think we know this, but we don't often think about it because the people around us, listen, their hearts aren't changed with our anger. Their hearts aren't changed when we lash out at them. Their hearts aren't changed when we make accusations and are judgmental. Hearts aren't changed that way. Their hearts certainly aren't changed when we jump onto social media and post that rant or that on Facebook or that stupid judgmental meme aimed at them. Some of you need to get off of Facebook. You know how hearts are changed? They are changed with empathy. Hearts are changed with compassion. Hearts are changed with love. See, if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, Jesus is suggesting that we are called to lead with love. So, in the last few minutes, I want to wonder with you. How do we imagine that God is moving us from a place of lashing out to a place of loving more? How do we imagine this? How is God doing this? Well, I want to suggest 2 ways. The first way is this: God's lowering our expectations of others. And yes, you heard me correct. This is not a typo. There are people in your life that you care deeply about who are going to forget your birthday. It's going to happen. There will be people in your life who don't say, "I'm sorry," or resist saying thank you. There will be friends who come out with you on your boat and they don't offer to chip in for gas. There will be people you will pay for their lunch over and over again and again, and they'll be so clueless that they'll never offer to pay for lunch. There will be people in your life who will not think about the things that you think about. There will be people in your life who will hurt you. Do you know why? Because those people are human just like you. You see, God didn't create superheroes. We are all just human. And the Bible is honest about this. In fact, in 2 Timothy, he says this, "For people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God." Why does he write this? Because he knows that we are all human. I'm human. Your pastor, I am imperfect. Just ask my wife. And if you are new to Central, you need to know this. I am going to say something that will eventually disappoint you. It might even offend you. If you are here long enough, there's likely a day that will come where your pastor will do something, make a decision, act a certain way that will disappoint you. And here's my prayer. My prayer is that you don't turn and leave Central. My prayer is that you don't turn and leave God, but that you recognize that your pastor is just as plain human as you are. And another thing that I love about Jesus is this. Jesus was never shocked by people's behavior. Did you know this? Jesus hung out with this woman at the well. Found out that she had been married 5 times and that the man she was shacking up with, they weren't even married. Was Jesus shocked? Was he offended? No. He loved the woman. It says he gave her living water. His disciples were always arguing. And one day Jesus caught them arguing about who was the best. They were arguing about who was Jesus' BFF. Who did Jesus like the most? Well, they were like a bunch of junior high students. Does Jesus vote them off or excommunicate them from the group? No, he uses them to change the world. Or Peter tells Jesus, "Jesus, I will never deny you. I'll never turn my back on you." Well, the minute Jesus is hanging on the cross and the cock crows, Peter denies Jesus. Is Jesus shocked? Does Jesus turn his back on Peter? No, he uses Peter to build the church. Jesus was never shocked by people's behavior. So how does God move us from lashing out to loving more? God's lowering our expectations of other people. It's interesting that during COVID here at Central, it seemed like at times we couldn't make anyone happy, right? It was a really hard time to lead. There were people who were mad that we closed, and then there were other people who were mad when we opened. People thought we should be more stringent on masking, and other people were offended that we were having people mask. People were upset that we weren't talking more about vaccinations, and people were upset because we said something about vaccinations. People got mad. People lashed out. Some people have left Central. Others quit giving. And in the kindest of ways, I had people come to me and ask, "Pastor Aaron, how do you do this? How do you keep this big church moving forward amidst all of this? How do you get over being so easily angered and offended?" You lower your expectations. We're all human. We're all sinners. We all mess up. People are going to let you down, and don't be shocked by it. How is God moving us from lashing out to loving more? By lowering our expectations of others. And here's the last thing, number 2, God's raising your gratitude for grace. Raise your hand if you have never gossiped. Raise your hand if you've never lied. Raise your hand if you've never cheated. I'm probably guessing that there's not a hand up out there because we all have. And the truth is, we all have. All of us have fallen short of the grace of God. But Paul says these words in Ephesians when he says, "For it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves, but," read it with me, "it is a gift of God." When we look in the mirror, the truth is this: we are nothing if it wasn't for the grace of God. Now, some of you are hearing this and saying, "Great, yeah, I get it, Pastor, love people. But that guy lied to me." Come on, you've lied before. "She is so arrogant." Again, come on. You've been arrogant before when you're not at your best. Or this is the best one yet. "But that person, Pastor, can you believe that they believe that? That is just crazy. I can't even begin to understand that they believe it that way. It's so far out in left field. Can you believe that they believe that?" Come on. You too believe some pretty crazy things in your life. We are all human, and we all survive only by the grace of God. And here is how God is moving you from a place of lashing out to a place of loving more, by raising your gratitude for grace. So as I close today, I do not want to come across as minimizing the pain some of you are going through. See, politics and friends being rude is one thing, but some of you are experiencing some significant pain. Maybe someone abused one of your children, or maybe a spouse that you trusted for years, you found out was living a double life. Maybe you are facing a horrible betrayal right now. But no matter what level of anger, there's this thought that I'm right, they're wrong. That I'm justified in my anger, and you're just plain wrong. And if you're not careful, your anger will justify you picking up a rock, a stone. If you did that to my son or my daughter, I have my stone. If you vote that way, well, I've got my stone. If you feel this way or that way about anything, I've got my stone. That's what you believe about the LGBTQA community? Well, I've got my stone. If you do this, you do that, well, I've got my stone. I'm ready to go on social media and to blast you. I'm ready to send that nasty email. I'm ready to make that nasty phone call because I'm right and you're wrong. Jesus came upon a group of men who were all holding stones like this, and they were standing in a circle. And in the middle of the circle was this woman, a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. And in Jesus' day, if you were caught in the act of adultery, the punishment was to be stoned. And Jesus approaches the group of men. He isn't shocked. He isn't surprised. He's not surprised by what the woman has done. And he is equally not shocked or surprised by how these men are carrying themselves. The story says that as he got there, he got down on his hands and knees and he did something in the sand. And it reads this: "But Jesus bent down and he wrote in the dust with his finger." Now, the Bible doesn't say what he was writing, but there is a certain tradition that suggests that what Jesus was doing was writing in the sand all the sins of the men who were gathered there. And then it goes on, when they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." It was as though Jesus was saying to them, you want to be angry? You want to try to right her wrong? Any of you who haven't sinned, then you can go ahead and chuck the stone first. And the story goes on to say that the men, one by one, walked away. Church, it's time for us to put down our stones. You see, we are invited to lead with love. His invitation to you isn't to make a point. The invitation is to make a difference. The invitation isn't to change someone's mind about some issue. The invitation is to help you see the love of the one who has changed our lives. And this invitation comes directly from Jesus himself, who is quick to listen, slow to speak, and he led with love. He doesn't ask us to be right. He calls us to love. Jesus invites us to lead with love. How is God moving us from a place of lashing out to loving more? By raising our gratitude for grace. When we look in the mirror, we see that we are just the same as the people around us. He is raising our gratitude for grace, all while lowering our expectation of those around us. If you consider yourself a Jesus follower, then the invitation is this: from none other than Jesus himself. The invitation is to lead with love. God's grace, God's peace, and God's love be with all of you. And all of God's children said, amen.